Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. My name is Heizel Hetman, and I work as the youth coordinator at CIP. You can think it's a little bit strange that it's sunny here, and I'm saying good evening, but since this lecture is going to be in English, we had to pre-record it to put subtitle and make this content accessible. Before we really start, I want to talk to you about something very important. That is our social campaign that we are doing. SIP against hunger and for dignity. Just point your phone to the QR code on the screen and you can donate food for families in need. Now, getting into the point, we have here with us very special guests who have come to talk to us about an important topic for me and us, and that is democratic education. We are pleased to welcome Iaakov Hecht, who is an Israeli educator and global pioneer of democratic schools. He founded the world's first called democratic school, helped found other, and connected democratic projects around the world. Along with him, we also have the psychologist Giuliana Mordente. She works mainly on issues of human rights, production of subjectivity, psychoanalysis, and education. And she created a project called Andanças Educativas, based on the visit of 30 democratic schools in Brazil and abroad. The idea of this lecture is to hear these two incredible educators about how democratic schools can develop singular human beings that are committed to the collective. Thank you two very much for being here. Let's hear Iaakov.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be with you today. I will tell you shortly my story about how I come to deal with the idea of democratic education. Like all of you, I was a student in a regular school. And when I was a student, I really suffered at school. I suffer because a lot of reasons. Because it was difficult to me to read and write. I'm dyslexic and dysgraphic, and it's difficult to me to sit on the chair 8 hours without moving. It's complicated to me to learn something and not knowing why I am learning this knowledge. It was really complicated, and I really suffer. So I decided to leave school when I was before I was 16. And when I leave school, I decided that I'm going to do, my goal in life is to build a school to student like me. In this time, it was around 50 years ago, I was sure that I am the only one that suffer. Maybe few other suffer. But step by step, I understand that more and more people suffer in this traditional school. And I decided to build a new kind of school, and it's taken me 10 years. Around when I was 26, I began to build my new school, and I call this school Democratic School. A lot of people ask me, why democratic? Maybe all the schools in the world, they are democratic. If you are in a democratic countries, also your school is democratic. So when I was in traditional school, I never understand the connection between school and the life outside school. It's look to me, why they do it? For example, it was quite clear what most of the adults doing, or what's the big question of all the adults outside school. And the big question, as you know, is what I'm going to do with my life. And this big question we never deal it inside the traditional school. So, to me, it was quite clear how we can prepare ourselves to be adults in democratic education, in democratic world, if until we are 18, people tell us what to learn, how to learn and check us if we know exactly what they expect that we will know. And then when we are 18, they tell us, now choose your life. It was to me clear that it's impossible. It's like we build a factory that destroy your ability to choose, your ability to choose your life, and then they tell you, choose your life. In this case, I say I will build a school that will be very similar to what I'm doing, what I see that the adults doing outside school. And that was the reason that I call it democratic education. Today we have around 3,000 democratic schools all over the world in more than 70 countries. And if I want to say what is democratic school and what is the common between all these 1,000 schools, it will be complicated because every democratic school is different. And we believe that every democratic school is different, exactly like every human being is different. So if everyone is different, so also our community is different and our school is different. But I think we have 4 central points that you can find, or it's not point, it's a basic, 4 central basic that you can find in all the democratic school. One is every student in this democratic school build his learning plan. So every student choose what to learn, how to learn, with whom to learn. He choose everything about how he learn. And that's connect to the idea that we believe that every human being is different. And if everyone is different, it cannot be that the same curriculum will fix exactly to different people. So in democratic school, every student choose his curriculum, and not only the curriculum, also how you learn, with whom you learn, who will be his teacher, and things like this. To do it, and in most of the democratic school, you begin when you are 4-year-old and continue until you are 18. So to build this curriculum, you can get help with your mentor. We have a very close connection between the adults and the student in democratic school, and the student choose their adults that they want to be in a close connection to him. And we have a different names, but one common name is mentor. And this is how we look about the difference between people, but also we live together. So for example, in my democratic school, we have 600 students and around 100 adults that we are living together. And to live together, we cannot do that everyone will do what he wants to do. We live as a democratic community. So we build our roles, the law of the school, we build together as a democratic committee. So a community. So we have every week a parliament meeting. It's a parliament democratic meeting that all the student and the teacher and also parents, they are welcome to this parliament meeting, and together we make the decision. And so we have law in our school, but we build the law together. Something very important to say about the democratic schools in Israel: we are part of the public school. We are not private school. In some other places in the world, we are private schools. So in our school, we need to keep the law of Israel, and we need to keep the law of the educational policy of Israel, but we give the power of the principle to all the community. So all the community can make a change and make decision together, and when we make decision, we build a committee that take responsible to make the decision happen. And if someone break the law, we have like a court or mediation committee that will deal with people that break the law. I think something very, very interesting in democratic schools, that not only students break the law. You know, in traditional school, only students break the law. Never no one else. In our case, everyone can break the law, and everyone can say to the other, I call you to the mediation committee or to the court. So it's a very justice. The student learn how to be the idea of justice. And the last thing that we can find in most of the democratic school is that we'll go and look about the content that we teach in our school from the point of view of human rights. So we can learn traditional learning of everything, but we can, for example, in Israel, we learn Bible. But in democratic school, we look it from the point of view of the rights of women, the rights of human being at all. So it will be very open discussion and focusing about the human rights. This is something today in a lot of democratic schools that I see all over the world. I see that they are focusing about the 17 goals of the United Nations. This is also something that very focusing in the democratic school. So today that I don't know, more than 30 years after we begin to deal with democratic education, I think we are around 35 years in this journey. I can say that today I really understand the idea of democratic education. And I really understand its mean that, to me, democratic education is the missing piece of all what we call democratic idea. I will explain. As I say, in the last 100 years, a lot of countries decide to call themselves democratic countries. And they call themselves democratic countries because they make election and they build a very good justice institute, courts, but they adapt the same education system that prepare people to live in undemocratic society. So most of the democratic countries take the system that prepare people in the past to live in dictatorship, and they live democracy, but the education system prepared children how to do exactly what they told to do. And this is, I think, one of the big problems today in the world. If you look all over the world, you see democratic countries that a lot of things not working like what we believe need to be democratic. And in this case, to me, the reason is because we build a system, the education system, that not fit the idea of democracy. And what we try to do is to make connection between education and democratic idea. I don't say that we success. Maybe it can be, and I hope that in the future we will do it much better, and a lot of other schools will try to be democratic. And when I say democratic, it's not to say that you need to be democratic like Hadera School. Be democratic in your way. But think, if really you prepare people to live in democratic society, if you really give them the tools to be a good democratic citizen. If they can choose, they can find their uniqueness. That's a big question. And I hope that step by step, it will take time, but more and more schools understand that democratic education is not nice to have. It's something that it's very important to the future of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Iaakov. I think it's very inspiring to hear your own story and how your struggle with education made you change the world. You change education and do something. It's commitment. And that's something that we want to talk in this Ticun. I think it's an example for all of us. And when you say, be democratic in your own way and think, you don't have to be something. We don't have like some
one way.
One way, yeah, formula.
Unlimited
In Portuguese, I don't know in English the exactly word, but you have to think if you're given the tools to prepare a citizen. I think that's very important, and it's an example for us to see that's possible.
Yeah, I think the major thing in democratic, and it's the idea that different is beautiful. Because if you are not democratic, you think that you are better than the other people. And I think the education system need to prepare you to like the idea that that people is different than you. This is the beautiful things that exist in the world. Think about the option that everyone will be Iaakov. It's so boring world, but it's so beautiful that we are different. And I think democracy is celebration of the different.
That's beautiful, but it's hard nowadays to have more and more people thinking the same. And I think Giuliana is going to talk about a little bit about that, right, Ju?
Yeah. So, hello, Hazel, Iaakov. Hello, everyone. It is always a pleasure to listen to Iaakov. I always learn a lot from this trait and sensitivity of his speech. So, thank you. Just introducing myself a little bit. My name is Giuliana Mordente. I am a psychologist and pedagogue. I have a master's degree in psychology. And currently, I am a psychology PhD student and a temporary professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ. And I would like to thank CP for this invitation. It's an honor for me to be here today, sharing this moment with Hazel, a dear friend, and Iaakov, someone I admire so much, a huge inspiration for me, a real guru. Iaakov and his family welcomed me with open arms at their home in Israel, and I'm very grateful for that, their family. So it's very exciting to meet you today, Iaakov, even virtually. And so I will share here the screen. Just 1 second. Well, during my research, I visited about 30 democratic schools in Brazil and abroad. They were very diverse schools, as Iaakov says, with different realities and contexts, with unique and singular dynamics, some public, other private, some rural schools, others in big cities. And it showed me the plurality of what can be understood as democratic education and its importance for the construction of a democratic society. As Iaakov says, how do you want to prepare students for a democratic society if we don't exercise that democracy at school? If we didn't have the opportunity to take responsibility for our choices, to think what we really want. And then when we finish school, we think that democracy is just to elect someone every 4 years. So the democratic model that this school struggle for is different from the liberal democracy based on inequality, intolerance, corruption, violation of human rights. Today in Brazil, democracy is a tough concept. But it's not exactly at this moment of fragility in our democracy that we should strengthen an education based on collective power. So we should struggle for a school aimed at raising a society with the participation of all its citizens in major political decisions, where no groups has privilege in decision-making, a democracy that aims to guarantee basic conditions for all, conditions such as food, housing, work, culture, without social inequalities and exploitation. And therefore, citizen participation and social commitment are something very important in these students' school life. And the protagonism of students at school is fundamental. In these schools, self-management of the students is a teaching method and the content. It is a pedagogical and also political goal. Self-management is not only the students' ways of organizing themselves, organizing their work, taking responsibility for their learning. It is an education that questions any kind of authoritarian power in society. An education that enables new forms of human relations aimed towards autonomy, freedom, and creativity. So it's not enough just change the organization of the classes. We need to think about the political interests of the education we want. So the neoliberal narrative of the technologies, of the big corporations, advocates a reform of the school, an innovation of the school. But which kind of school reform? For which kind of society? So it is important to be aware of the liberal pedagogical reforms, that reforms that maintain an unequal project of society. So just changing the school teaching methods out of context, it's not enough to change its ethical, political dimension. Here in Brazil, what we call democratic schools are only those schools that support a political and ideological commitment to social transformation, which present a critical analysis of social realities. As Paulo Freire says, schools that seek to break the oppressive social structures. So democratic education is not a simple game for the students. It has a rich political revolutionary content. And how can we promote a democratic education in a country so big as Brazil? Here in Brazil, we tend to believe that the only way to universalize education, to provide access to all citizens, is through the standardization of education. Através da padronização do ensino, da padronização da educação. The fact that students at the same age have to learn the same subjects at the same time, at the same way. But as Iaakov said, how can we believe in a standard education for such a radically different individuals in many diverse contexts with extremely unequal bases? It is possible to expand access to education without degrading its quality. And on the other hand, we tend to think that the only way to face this standardization is to individualize it, with a completely individualized teaching. This is why many people think that democratic education, which works with the singularities, the desires, and the interests of each student, rule out collective work. So why do we always fall to the extremes? Reflect on the standardization of education doesn't mean falling into a selfish individualization. An individualization that blames the individual for all the school problems. So experience of democratic education show us the possibility of working with singularities without erasing collective trajectories. So working with different times of each student, with different learning rhythms, with different interests, does not mean ignoring collective work. Because an education built on difference is not an individualistic education. Equality does not mean that everyone is identical. It is each one having the opportunity to be what they want. And the autonomy that these schools work on is not unselfish, individualistic, and liberal autonomy in a every man for himself way. But it is an autonomy as a collective practice. It is not an individualistic process dissociated from the collectivity. Autonomy is not a static and permanent condition to be conquered. They are practiced in a constant movement between students and educators. So students can have a personal education while being part of the collective school activities, such as general meetings, committees, workshops, common projects. We are never alone. Whether we like it or not, we are part of a school community. An example of this discussion between the paradigm of standardization and the paradigm of individualization is the inclusive education for children with special educational needs. The mandatory for these children to join school has turned the traditional models upside down. They didn't know how to diversify their pedagogical practice to better receive these students. So, how did the schools react to this mandatory? By segregating these students inside school. The school has individualized education through tutors for each student, proposing a different activities from the rest of the class. So they thought that this was the only way they had to guarantee the learning of these students. But the point is that exclusion, that individual exclusion, does not make us question the entire school model. It is the educational system that must be changed, not the students adapt through individual strategies. If the school assumes that everyone learns the same at the same time, at the same way, this problem will remain. So how can we think a collective education that also respects each student on their times, interests, and process? And I'd like to mention the philosophers Deleuze and Guattari, who have a special meaning for the word singularization that I like very much. For them, singularization does not mean individualizing. It is the ability to build an education with our own school reference, with creative and original references. It is a refusal for the hegemonic reference that set what is school and what is education. So it is the possibility of building an education with new reference, creating gaps in the dominant system. And finally, we need to dissolve the fake dichotomy between individual and group, understanding that we cannot think one without the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuliana. It's very inspiring to hear you as well. And hearing you both, I think it becomes very clear how we need to take part to change education and change the world. We cannot just wait someone that will come and or just go find a democratic school, because be in a democratic school is to build it together. It's not going to fall from the sky. And I think it's important, the phrase that Iaakov says, democratic education is the missing piece to democratic society. If we want a better place to me in this, if we want a better place for all of us, we have to take part. We have to assume this task and change. And we can change doing the lectures like this and sharing knowledge, but also I think we have many accusations about the democratic schools, like it does not prepare to real life, or how is my kid going to be in the work or vestibular, or how is going to be a successful person in this world. And I think maybe if you can talk a little bit about it, how can we respond about those comments?
I will begin with the real life. What is the real life? And I will respond in the beginning about our society. I think a lot of people confuse, and they believe that democracy is what the majority decide or not decide. The majority need to decide who will be our dictatorship, and he will tell us what to do. That's a lot of people think this is democracy, and I think the new generation, that part of them was in democratic education, and also people that not only in democratic education, I think they will bring the new step of democratic education. The new step, I think, is diversity. That diversity is beautiful. That I think it's something that very strong you learn in democratic school. In democratic school, you learn that it's not the most important is what the variety, what the majority think, because you are a small community, and yeah, it can be that half of the people think something, but a lot of other people will suffer in this decision. So, democratic school, it's a good place to practice democracy and to be a lab to the future democracy. And I think democracy will develop themselves as human being will be. Like democracy 100 years ago, it's totally different from what it's today. And it will be totally more different in 100 years. So today we're more keeping, for example, women's rights than 100 years ago. But also today, it's not the best way. We are not equal. And I think we have a huge way to do. So I think democracy is something that human beings develop. And I think school is prepare you to continue to develop this democracy and not to be part of the machine and not think about what happened around you. This is one thing. The second thing, I think it's quite clear that what we are trying to do, what will help you in the future is not the degree that you will have. What will help you to the future is your ability to learn. Because what we see today is we see world change very fast. And if you know to learn, and not important what, but you have the ability, you believe in yourself, you know how to learn, you will succeed in the future. I will give you example. My small son is 19 in the army, and he finished school. He have more dyslexic than me. It's very difficult to him to read and write, but he loves to read and write. So it's difficult, but he loves, and his ability of learning is very high. He never do the matriculation. He done part of the matriculation exams, but it's not. He is not was in all the lessons that going inside school. He chose to learn not to learn a lot of things. He learn only what is interesting to him. Today, he is in the army, and in the army he go to a very difficult course of computer. He become expert in computer. He never was expert in computer. He go to the course in the army, but he finished this, and a lot of people want to get to this course, but he finished it as an excellent student in these courses, because his ability to learn, it's very high. And that's, I think, the future. If you want to prepare children to the reality, prepare them to know to achieve what they want to achieve, to know to achieve, to believe themselves in their ability to learn.
So whenever we talk about democratic education, the same questions arise. Do the schools prepare for the entrance exams in the universities? Do students actually learn in the system? This thing about the real world, how the students deal with all freedom and later with the real world. Do they get a job in the future? But we don't ask ourselves, is the traditional model, our current model, successful? Like more than 80% of young people in Brazil did not attend universities. So why we keep believing in this education model, and we are so afraid about other models, so afraid. And this thing about real world, like, is a democratic school a bubble with no contact with outside the world? The children don't circulate it in other spaces, don't meet other people, don't are concerned with the society problems. So for me, democratic education is an education that aims to question tradition. And what tradition is that? For example, the current Brazilian law does not oblige us to put all the tables in line with the teacher in front, organized by age, by grades. So what would be the reasons that we continued following the same school model? How can we break this tradition? So I really hope that all the schools and Yaakov's speech and Yaakov's work and all the educators' work in the democratic schools and outside the schools can be an inspiration, showing that another education is possible. So we can be together to think another education. So that's it.
I can't thank you too enough for being here with us in this Ticun. It's an honor, really an honor, to be able to build this powerful knowledge space. And in Brazil, and nowadays, we're seeing that knowledge is something that we have to fight for. And breaking tradition and guaranteeing human rights and guaranteeing democracy is something that we have to fight for. And thank you for sharing your experience with us, and also for being so committed to change the world. I hope that this lecture may have brought some reflection and some willingness to action for people that are watching us today. Thank you too very much.
I want to say to the end, that because it's connected to Ticun, that I think democratic education is a place that believe that Tikkun Olam is possible. So good luck.
Perfect ending. Thank you, Giuliana. Thank you, Iaakov.
Thank you. Thank you once again.